Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the planning board meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have one member out in the parking lot grabbing his reading glasses and another alternate on the way, but we're going to
there he is.
Up, here he is.
No pressure.
So I'd like to request two changes to the agenda. We have item 4A on the agenda is the city council referral. I'd like that to be first on the agenda after our minutes, and then I'd like to move up item 2H and 3A, which is Bora Dunlin Way, to the next item after that, if somebody would care to.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes of May 15th. Has everybody had a chance to look those over? Any changes?
Move to approve the minutes of May
Second.
15th.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain, I was not here.
Got it. We have a city council referral for Coakley Road connection. I believe we have one of your people on Zoom to make a presentation.
Correct.
Yep, I'm letting Eric in.
Traffic engineer Eric Eby will join.
Eric, you on?
Now can you hear me?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Are you ready for me to
We're
start
ready.
talking? Present.
We're ready. Dive in, Eric.
All right. Okay. So we're here before you to ask for a recommendation on this proposed connector road. It would be running between Coakley Road and Borthwick Avenue. It would be centered on the property line between Granite Group Plumbing Supply and the Fairfield Inn property. And this project is to is part of a overall. It's a key concept. First part of an area-wide projects. One is to remove the signal on the bypass at the Coakley and Cottage intersection with the bypass. It's also to allow access into the neighborhood when the bridge over the Hodgson Brook gets reconstructed. And it's also a key component getting the Kate Street Bridge rebuilt. It's to reduce traffic on the bypass between Borthwick and the Circle. It's one of the key first steps. So the roadway as planned would be one lane in each direction. We would also provide on-street parking on this connector road, as well as a few spaces on Coakley Road, because there would be a slight reduction in parking from the Fairfield Inn site. There would also be a sidewalk constructed along the new roadway, so that residents of the Coakley Road neighborhood will have direct access to the multi-use path along Borthwick Avenue. And we would construct new driveways, 2 new driveways into the Fairfield Inn and 1 new driveway to the Granite Group, as well as closing off the one of the existing driveways to the Granite Group from Coakley Road. So that is an overall concept plan. It's in the design stage right now. As I said, it's centered on the property line, so we're trying to minimize or equalize the impacts from each site. About 6,000 square feet needed from each one of these sites to build the roadway, as well as some temporary construction easements. And the project is in the wetlands buffer area, so if we do get approval from City Council to do this land taking, we would be coming back to the planning board for a wetlands conditional permit because of the work in the buffer area. We're aware of that, and that's a future step. So there is easements needed as well, because there will be construction on each site, building the new driveways, reconfiguring the parking spaces, and tying in the new sidewalks to their property. So these temporary easements will be about 6,900 square feet on the Granite Group site and just over 15,000 square feet on the Fairfield Inn site. These would just be during construction. They would not be any permanent easements. Only the right-of-way for the roadway will be permanent. Next slide. So the next steps is a recommendation to the City Council. They will have a public necessity meeting in July. I believe it's July 14th. And if that goes well, then we would come back to planning board for a wetland conditional use permit. And we will need to negotiate with property owners and potentially condemn the land necessary for the new roadway. We've had appraisals done. We know what the fair market value of this land is. We've met with each of the landowners, and they're well aware of the project. So the next steps is to meet with them if this goes forward. The state project to remove the signal on the bypass, it's a state-funded project. We've just had a kickoff meeting with them. Next step is to go out and get consultants on board to do the engineering study, do the analysis to see what is needed to divert the traffic onto this connector road and what it would mean at the Borthwick Ave intersection to accommodate the extra traffic there. Likewise, Coakley Road culvert, we're also looking to get that project culvert reconstructed in 2027, and that needs consultant to be brought on board as well. So at this point, it's preliminary stages, no consultants on board yet. I try to keep that brief, but any questions, be glad to entertain.
Any questions for this traffic engineer? Yes.
Thank you, Eric. If you could just help us show the public, just in a broad sense, what is the overall timeline? Because there's about, 4 or 5 different projects that are all being coordinated in order to make this all happen. But if you could just say, within so many years of getting to each of the stages so that people will actually know what to anticipate to see coming forward.
Yes, this project would be the first one. We could probably get this constructed next year, if not, the end of this year, but that would be really pushing it. It'll likely construction next year. Kate Street Bridge would be in 2028, that forward, getting the design done and getting that out to bid. The Coakley Road culvert, 2027 for getting that rebuilt. And the signal removal on the bypass, that would be the last step. Right now, it's on the DOT schedule for 2031, but if we can get the engineering and design and build, get it out to bid, and if these other projects are in place, we could bump that up a little quicker. But right now, it's scheduled for 2031, that signal removal.
Thank
But
you.
the first step would be the Coakley Road culvert for 2027, or actually this project next year.
Well, first step is a recommendation from the planning board to the council. Yes, Don.
I have a couple questions. I'll do it in reverse order because you just spoke about the signal on Route 1. If the work gets done, if the state doesn't want to move forward, but the work gets done, let me back up. If the state holds true to their timeline, but the work gets done sooner, would a process be in place where they could bag those lights? And so effectively we have this updated intersection and the structures come down at 31. What happens if that doesn't get accelerated?
Accelerate because of the need to really prohibit the left turn. You wouldn't want to bag that signal out there if you weren't constructing a median as well. You need to be able to physically restrict those left turns in and out of Coakley and Cottage. So it would all be done at one time. You wouldn't bag the signal and leave the intersections as they are now.
Okay.
You would want to.
And thank you for that. And then my second question is, has there been any indications, and it's fine if you don't feel comfortable answering at this point, but with the two main landowners, are they protesting this or in agreement with this?
No, they so far they've been in agreement with it. Granite Group is eager to have access to Borthwick Ave as well. It helps for customers getting to their site. Fairfield Inn likewise would gain access to Coakley. Their concern was that they would be losing some parking, but we've made every effort to maintain as much parking around the site as possible. There will be a few spots on the street rather than on their site, but it's still the same number of parking spaces.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Eric, hi, Joe Almeida. For the record, is there any listed in any of your documentation, are the physical addresses listed? I'm seeing lot numbers and so forth, but I'm not finding physical addresses listed on the drawings or the letter.
Yes, they are listed. They may be on that plan. It's hard to see, but one of them is 650. I believe it's Borthwick, and the other one is 100 Coakley. I may have those reversed, but one has a Coakley Road address, one has a Borthwick address.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that those were actually listed for the record. Thank you.
Hi, Eric. It's Andrew Simonis. Generally in favor of alleviating traffic congestion, so sounds like a great plan. Just wondering if there are data sets or some statistics that show the traffic changes or the current traffic standing data for that intersection and what this proposes to change or improve upon?
Yes, as part of the West End Yards approval process, a traffic study was conducted for them, and we had them look at that alternative as what would happen if this proposed project was put into place. So they have analyzed that based on their traffic study that was done a few years ago. We will be, as part of this project, updating that study. We'll do our own traffic study as part of the engineering work to make sure that this could accommodate the shift in traffic. We have some current traffic pattern counts at the Coakley and Cottage intersection, and we would, do the analysis to redistribute that traffic over to the Borthwick Ave intersection as far as the left turns are concerned, and analyze that and make sure that that intersection will work properly. If it needs any re-signal timing or lane use changes, that would be taken into account during the engineering study.
Is that you, Bill?
Yes, Bill Bowen. There's another property on Coakley at that corner that the Portian that we've has been on and off our agenda over time. And does this general rearrangement of traffic have an implication for what we will be seeing again from them in the future?
It should. They're aware of the project. I was involved in the scoping meeting with the DOT for their site as they come forward with the next project. So they're aware of having to look at the alternative as if that the signal at Coakley and Cottage goes away and their left turns would be forced to use this new connector roadway. So they are aware of that, and they are analyzing that as part of their traffic study.
Any other questions? Somebody like to make a motion to recommend the council acquire these rights?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item on the agenda will be request of Brora LLC as owner for property located at 0 Dunlin Way, requesting design review for construction of 3 6-story multifamily residential buildings consisting of approximately 270 dwelling units with associated site improvements. This property is on Assessor's Map 213, Lot 12, and lies within the Office Research District and Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District. This will be a public hearing. The rules for our public hearings are there'll be a presentation by the proponent, questions by planning board members, and then the public comment to, for, or against the application will be up to 3 rounds. Anyone providing comment, you should provide your name and address for the record. If you wish to speak in the subsequent second or third rounds, you must speak in the first round. Direct your comments up to me. First round is oral comment only, up to 3 minutes. Second round, if anybody needs it, is 5 minutes, and you can make a presentation if you'd like. And the third round is 5 minutes, again, oral presentation only. So with that, who is here to present this application?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Hansen with Tyne Bonds. We're the civil engineers on the project. Also with me here tonight representing the owner and applicant is Kimberly Pauldrak, and representing our architecture team is Peter Habib. So we've now been here a couple times with this project, so now we're obviously here for our first public hearing to get some input from the public, hopefully. The project site, while it's addressed at Dunlin Way, is at the end of Portsmouth Boulevard. The section of road that it fronts is currently barricaded on 2 ends, one on the Dunlin Way side, and then also on the Portsmouth Boulevard side. The project will be, as read into the record, approximately 274 residential units in 3 separate buildings. Those buildings are labeled A, B, and C on the site plan. There are parking spaces under building C, and as proposed, the amenity space, leasing office, and that sort of infrastructure for this project will all be located in building B, which is the center building. Peter, there's a color version of this further in the packet that might be better suited. As part of this project, we'll also be upgrading and rebuilding the section of Portsmouth Boulevard in front of this development. So that will be enhanced streetscape, parallel parking spaces, sidewalks, and those sidewalks will then connect to the end of Portsmouth Boulevard. In the last month, we have begun work on a traffic study, which we're still in the very early stages of, but that will be in the process over the next couple months and will be completed as we get into the TAC process. We also did see there was a letter posted on the public comment on the city website earlier from the larger Osprey Landing development adjacent to our property. The main point that we saw in that letter was mainly traffic related. So as I just mentioned, we will be doing a traffic study. And they also mentioned the potential of having a gate at the end of Portsmouth Boulevard where it meets with Dunlin Way. And we're certainly open to exploring that with the fire department and the rest of TAC when we get into that process. So that's really all we have for presentation, and be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the applicant?
Since no one else is raising their hand, I will. So I had actually brought that up a little bit at our last time, and just want to reiterate again that I do think, because I live in a neighborhood that has one of these gates that's emergency access only, over by Foundry Place by the garage, and I think it works very well. So I think if you thought about putting in something just beyond the driveway where Building C is and Dunlin Way, I think that will be great access. So I do hope that you try to put that in and really talk to TAC about that and the particulars of it. It would be really helpful, I think, to all the residents of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and just, I'm sure, many of you are familiar with this area, but all of the access to this site exits out to that traffic signal at Market Street and Portsmouth Boulevard. So we anticipate, the majority, if not all of at least the residential traffic would be taking a left out of the site, not going to Dunlin Way. And what was mentioned in that letter from the abutter, which we think is a good point, is the delivery vehicles, the Amazons, the UPSs. They're the ones that we feel would primarily be trying to cut through there, other than the occasional lost vehicle. Everyone that lives there is going to know that going in further is not the way out.
Yes, Bill.
So I've got a two-part question on parking. The first is to be sure I understand the math. On page 22 of the presentation, there's a little chart in the upper right-hand corner that describes it. And you've got 45 units at 499 square feet, where 500 square feet would require more parking. You got 124 units at 499 square feet, where another square foot would require more parking. And when you add it up together, the totals of the parking that you're providing are about 89% of what the standard for the city would call for. Is that kind of the frame that we're operating in?
Yeah, so we are, there is an allowable 20% reduction for being a quarter mile from a bus stop, which there is one near the intersection of Portsmouth Boulevard and Commerce Way. So we are utilizing that 20% reduction to meet the parking requirements. We fully understand that, the program of the building and the unit sizes will likely change through the permitting process. We'll have to continuously update that calculation to make sure we're staying in compliance with what's required by zoning.
So the second part of the question is ultimately you're going to be dependent on the market for having people live there.
Yep.
That this fits what they're looking for, and to have basically one parking space per unit for a lot of people will not work. So the latitude that this board has in talking about parking gives us authority to issue a conditional use permit based on a variety of other factors that go into the thinking. Whether you've got incentives for carpooling and van pooling, whether there's a transit subsidy that you offer to your residents, and the one that is significant, I think, is shared parking on a separate lot would be something that you could do. Behind in the office complex, there's a lot of actually somewhat vacant parking space to the rear. So I guess it's a two-part thought here, that if that's the reality of what is going to happen, is that many of these people will park a second car either over in the lot there that you own or that someone else owns. Are we operating with an artificial constraint? And could that valve be opened larger? And if so, would you change the design of the building if you weren't trying to shoehorn something in to meet an arbitrary parking requirement that the city may or may not impose on you?
So, I guess to boil it, are you saying would we consider a design that incorporated less parking if we were to explore some shared parking arrangement with the surrounding area? Is that kind of where?
Yes, I'm particularly concerned about recreation and the
Yeah.
fact that you don't have any. You got some trails, but you're going to have lots and lots of little kids and nowhere for them to go play on a playground or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a good comment, and I think it's something that we'll need to explore further, and we're happy to do so. But yeah, that's good feedback, and I think something we'll take to the team, and we can vet out further. One thing I can mention as well is we are adding just under 40 spaces within the right of way that we're not including in our calculation here. So those very well, there's really nothing else out here, so those will likely be used by probably visitors to this site. So the parking that does help the ratio a little bit as well. But it's a point well taken, and we'll continue to explore it as a group.
Yes, Tony.
You didn't happen to bring any hard copies with you. Both the downloaded copy that I have and the city's copy seems to have some corruption of the figures on the
I
drawing.
didn't. We had issued an updated sheet that apparently didn't make it into the packet.
Or maybe I didn't download the right one. Okay.
It might not have gotten in. It was a last-minute ad when we submitted last month that we noticed the day of the meeting. So,
Yeah. I just want to make sure I heard something correctly. All the parking along the street, you're not including in your calculations. Those are
Correct.
extra.
correct.
And do you know what your ratios would be if you did include those? Would you be?
I don't. It'd be, I think, around 1.3 maybe.
I want to make sure that we don't create a situation. It's a delicate balance here. On one end, excessive parking is the worst. We end up taking, altering more land we need to, taking down more trees we need to. But on the other hand, this is next to a residential neighborhood. Yeah, there's a gate, but that doesn't mean that. How do we make sure that nobody's parking in front of their homes and walking because this parking lot is full? So that's a question I have for you.
Yeah, and I guess back to my previous answer, it's something we're gonna have to continue to explore as we get into the more detailed design of this. But yeah, it works out to it's about 1.25 spaces per unit is what we currently have.
Okay. And then entirely separate question. You seem to be taking down a lot of trees that are even beyond the parking lot. Why not keep those?
We need that space to basically chase the grade back up the hill. So it's exclusively for grading. Because we're cutting into that hill with the parking, because that slopes up pretty abruptly once you get a couple hundred feet off the road. And so we are sort of tiering the parking up a little bit to mitigate that as best we can. But it's at some point when the parking ends, we have to then chase that grade back up until we can tie it in.
Just as a quick reminder for everybody, including the public, this is a design review discussion, and we're not expected to have final answers to basically any of these questions. What I'm hearing from the first questions are parking details need to be vetted and information provided. This is a very sophisticated team. I would think you might be able to have examples of similar projects in other locations where you have parking data that you could provide that would be helpful for the board to look at your ratios that you're furnishing. And if I'm wrong, and you don't, but even if it's not a project you did, if there's a project like this that you could get data from in New Hampshire, that would be the best. In Portsmouth would be even better, but probably won't find one in Portsmouth. Joe?
I just want to pick up on a comment that Tony made. So the sheet 401, I believe it is, shows the extent of the, not 401, it's 201, shows the extent of the tree removal going up the embankment. So that is a complete removal of all vegetation. in the
Yeah,
footprint.
so 401 shows the actual grading that is causing that.
Understood. You've included a design going back, a couple of other previous parking designs that show the parking curving up with the, with the buildings that potentially could minimize how far up the embankment you have to go with clear cutting?
So we do, there's a couple things going on with the current parking layout. Is the rows of parking that are closest to the buildings, there's larger landscaped islands between the double rows that we're utilizing to then raise the grade of the next tier.
I see.
And then between 2 and 3, there's actually a retaining wall to again raise that last tier even higher. And the goal is to get that up as high as possible to then minimize the amount of cut back into that slope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Andrew?
On your previous plan, you had some trees along the end of Building C towards Dunlin Way. And while I recognize that driveway is 75 feet wide, they're not on the current plan. I just wanted to make sure those got carried forward.
Yes, there will be a full landscape plan once we get into this, which is not included in this packet. I think there's some visual renderings
sure.
in the conceptual consultation package, I think is the one you may be referring to.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like those are really
But
important.
yeah, that will certainly be one of the, focus areas of the landscaping plan will be that buffer area.
Yeah.
Doing something on that hillside, like, as it's been mentioned a couple times, those trees are coming down, so we'll want to revegetate that. So that will need to be looked at closely, and then obviously the areas directly between the buildings, those sort of amenity areas. Those are
I
kind
mean,
of the,
my focus is specifically and intensely towards that Dunlin Way end where you have existing residential single-family homes that have no choice here. They have input, but sometimes they don't have a choice. And so hopefully we can add more robust planting plans there with full mature trees instead of the smaller saplings initially. And then from experience with other parking garages that we have around town, there's sometimes a beeping or a light or some form of alert. Is there anything like that in your garage entry that we have to be considering?
so obviously it has not been designed.
For sure.
Sites that don't exit onto a street, I haven't typically seen any sort of audible or flashing alarm like that. But yeah, it's not been designed.
If you can tell, I'm trying to be cognizant of those four single-family homes that are right on the end of Dunlin Way, and any change or lighting implication there is important to consider. And then if Building C, which is the closest to some of these homes, is 6 stories, is that plus or minus 72 feet, or?
Yeah, it's about there.
Yeah, so it would be helpful for the public and for the board, I think, to see a massing study or a shadow study to some extent that shows really either the perspective down or the perspective up from the neighboring properties. I think that would provide quite a bit of context to what 6 stories actually means.
Okay.
You talked about putting parking along Portsmouth Boulevard in front of the buildings. Could you also put loading zones? Because I think that would be handy for deliveries.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, and we'll need to incorporate, I think, a loading zone somewhere, whether it's on the street or on site. Some of that may be driven by where the mailroom ends up, but it's a very good idea.
forgive me if you already said this. I've been trying to digest all of this. A couple questions for you about the zoning ordinance. Your property has two entrances onto it, on the right?
Yes, yep.
Either end.
Two driveways?
Yeah.
Is there something in the ordinance about one driveway per site location?
It's in the site regs, and in our conversations with legal, if someone's coming for site plan review, they could request a waiver
Okay.
from that provision. If they're not going through site review, they have to comply, and so like a single family wants the two driveways, they typically have to come get a variance
Okay. But they can get a waiver from the planning board?
through site plan review.
Okay. And you're, due to the massing of the building, you'll have to have some public benefit, right?
Not within the GNUD.
Not
We're in the
within-
Gateway Neighborhood Overlay District. So, yeah, there's, we'll be getting incentives through a land donation.
Oh, that's what I mean, yeah. so-
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the incentives.
Yes.
Okay, so that's through the land donation part?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Neil, how might the project change other than going up in terms of number of units if the swap is successful, the transfer is successful?
How will it change
Yes,
from what's in front of you?
yes.
This is the project with the land transfer.
So this is 360?
It's 274. So yeah, we'd be allowed up to 360, but the lot's not big enough to handle that.
So it won't be 360, it'll be 270?
It'll be 270 or 274. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Whatever the...
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Have you had a scoping discussion about traffic yet with any TAC or anybody?
Not yet. No. We just finished it, or they're finishing up right now. My traffic group a trip generation study, which we like to do ahead of having a scoping meeting with the city.
What's your sense, you'll get some more input tonight on this, but how far do you foresee the study going in terms of intersections? Obviously out to
It'll
Portsmouth.
obviously be the light at Portsmouth Boulevard and Market Street. It'll likely be the next light down at Woodbury and Market. Potentially the next one going to Arthur Brady, and then the I-95 interchange. And then maybe the Commerce Way Woodbury. But yeah, best guess that's probably the limit of the study.
Andrew?
Also, on the topic of offsite traffic, in the back of Commerce Way that exits on where the old brick schoolhouse was.
Yeah, it exits to Woodbury. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe some wayfinding signs, directionals, things of that nature would really help, not only for deliveries, but also residential and guests and what have you. As this entire neighborhood takes shape, I think that locals even would help or benefit from having some sort of directionals over there. And then to boot, on the end of Dunlin Way, just really notifying that it's a dead end or it's a gated ending.
Yeah, if it does end up being gated, it'll likely be probably closer to the Portsmouth Boulevard intersection. It'll need some sort of, and there may already be because it's blocked off right now. So
Yeah.
I haven't been out there in a while, so I don't remember, but it's very likely signed already.
Yes, Tony?
One more comment. I would like to see, when you come back, some architecture of where, I mean, some building aesthetics, some elevations, obviously, but where you put the entrances, the public access would play a key part in where people, if they do overflow parking and where they are. So if you count the buildings from 12 o'clock as building 1, then the building 2, then building 3 at 3 o'clock, if building 3 has its main entrance maybe in a plaza between building 2 and 3, obviously you're going to have egress for fire and life safety, throughout the building on the first floor. But if the public entry is up that direction, I think the chances of people parking in the neighborhood and walking that distance, they'd probably be more encouraged to park on the, if that's due north, on the northwest side of any excess land. So I'm just, again, trying to use the architecture and the entry of the building to play it to a way to create that human behavior is less likely to park in a convenient location that is not on this property. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep,
Okay, great.
absolutely.
And so maybe even it goes to as far as moving that roadway somewhere else, that entry, that second entry somewhere else. I don't know, but that's for you guys to look at. But that's where that's where I'm going to be paying particular attention to when it comes back for the site plan review.
Have you had any discussions with the neighbors yet?
I don't believe so, no.
And we've talked about a site walk, which I'm personally in favor of. I don't know how much folks would want to do it, but I think it's important. There's quite a bit of grade, a lot of issues here. Probably a lot of ticks out there, but, you know, it is what it is.
I think it would be helpful once we have those shadow studies or the height and dimensionals of the buildings.
So you think maybe later in the process?
Or sooner, depending how they get those reports out.
I think the applicant would probably be best to inform us when they would like our opinion of it.
Well, I think there's some site issues to see. I mean, we're all generally familiar with the area. I just don't want to lose the thought, and I think we should get out there and see it. It's important. Yes, Joe?
I just think a development of this scale requires us to go out there, to be honest.
Yeah,
with you.
it's-
Really, just for due diligence. I just want to ask the general question, since this is more of a work session. What happened to podium construction? Why are we not putting parking beneath buildings at grade level anymore?
My understanding is it's cost. It's just,
Prohibitively
It
expensive.
eliminates a massive amount of site disturbance, however, which is also cost, but parking is covered, you don't have to plow it, you can actually charge for it. It's, just curious, it used to be, within the last 10 years, it was a very popular solution to developments like this. I'm just curious as to why we don't see it anymore in a very short amount of time. That's all.
Yes, Bill?
So we're treating this as a one-off project when it probably is part of a bigger picture. And you may not be, ready to talk about any bigger picture, but is there a thought that this is part of something that will grow and there'll be more similar projects in that area?
I mean, potentially the whole area was rezoned with the overlay. There is the land transfer that will be, taking place as part of this, so there will likely be a development associated with that through an affordable housing.
And just as a quirky little thing, the railroad runs to the north there. Is it possible to cross the road and have the Piscataqua be any part of the thought of what happens, of where this exists?
Privately owned.
Yeah, I think it's privately owned.
Private ownership on the other side.
Okay.
Have you done test pits along that slope to know what kind of, do you really need to grade it? Is there any chance that there's ledge there to?
We did do some borings out there. I don't recall offhand how deep the ledge. It is shallow, but I don't recall it being as shallow as we kind of were all expecting it to be.
So you probably will need to actually do all that grading.
Yeah, I think so. I don't recall how far up the hill the borings went, so it's likely something that may need additional study. But that is something that we talked about early on in the process when we were kind of the same thought you did, that the ledge was going to be really shallow, that you could just cut the ledge face and save more of that vegetation. If there is an opportunity to do that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, retaining wall of that length would be rather costly.
Yeah, and we also like the idea of maintaining that ability for the trail access up to the top of that hill, and having a large vertical face is going to make that a lot more challenging, if not impossible.
Any other questions or comments for the applicant?
I guess just to appease my curiosity, and you may have come before us with this plan, but there was no opportunity to stack buildings one in front of the other, such as building C behind building B because of the topography.
Not sure I'm following.
So dragging building C effectively
Off the roadway, you're saying?
off the roadway and behind building B in the same curvature of the lot and having some of that parking closer to the street.
So we can't have parking between the building and the street? It has to be behind the building?
Right.
So there could be things, like, I mean, you can see the left is where we were with conceptual, where they were all more block buildings, and then when we came, now we have the L shape. So, there is a possibility, depending on where the building design lands, that you could end up with two L-shaped buildings, but for the most part, it's going to be something similar to,
The right-hand side.
yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Can open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application, step up, sir, and name and address. Not working.
Thank you, sir, for moving this up on the agenda. We greatly appreciate it. My name is Rich DiPantima, 16 Dunland Way in Portsmouth. We're here to specifically talk about the safety concerns. We're not here to talk against this overall project. We understand and recognize and appreciate the need for housing in Portsmouth. So we're not here trying to play the NIMBY game. We appreciate what Council Moreau said about having the gate / cul-de-sac that exists near the Foundry Way garage is a similar proposal that we would like to see here. If I could get my assistant here to show you a description, because the words are worth a picture's worth 1,000 words. That's what you're seeing now is what exists now on Foundry Way to prevent the cars leaving the garage from entering the Islington Creek neighborhood. So there is a precedent for doing this kind of thing to protect neighborhoods. If you already know that Dunland Way...
At a time, one at a time, people, please.
Okay, she's just presenting for me. I'm speaking, sir.
Well, she was speaking as well, so I'm sorry.
Sorry. So the historical perspective is that on Portsmouth Boulevard / Dunland Way, there were barriers that were put in a number of years ago to block off that area because of heavy traffic and speeding that came down that road into the neighborhood. Matter of fact, there was a severe accident where a car rolled over in one of our neighbors' yards from speeding through that neighborhood where the proposed project is now on Portsmouth Boulevard / Dunland Way. So the issue is, and I would like to get that picture again, the second picture of what you're seeing there is the development. But what you didn't see on the other slides here was that right behind and into this development on Dunland Way, Osprey Drive, and Blue Heron Drive, there are 18 homes and 329 apartments. Osprey Landing has 329 apartments ranging from 1 to 4 bedrooms. So if you have the traffic from 270 units built here going through Dunland Way, up Osprey Drive, and then also through Blue Heron, you're creating a severe safety hazard for well over more than 400 residents and many, many children who play on those streets. So I cannot emphasize enough, regardless of all the other considerations regarding this project, there must be a barrier that's placed at the end of Building C, right after the last house on Dunland Way. It cannot be left to chance of drivers deciding whether they want to take the easy way out to Portsmouth Boulevard, to Commerce Way, or out to Market Street. It has to be a demand that they cannot go to the right through the neighborhood that consists of over 400 residents, 329 apartments, and 18 homes. That is not safety. That's not a safety issue that needs to be debated. That's a given. And I appreciate the time. And I have a petition I'd like to give to the council regarding this issue.
It's the planning board.
It's planning board, but thank you. Anybody else here or on Zoom who'd like to speak to, for, or against this application? Anybody on Zoom?
No one owns it.
One more, I'm going to ask one more time, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Thank you very much. Close the public hearing.
Is there a second round? Or no?
Well, I asked. If that was a misunderstanding on my part, I apologize. I'm going to reopen the public hearing. If you wish to speak the second round, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
5
sir.
minutes.
I know we had 3 minutes in the first round, and I suspect I made my point pretty clearly in the first round regarding the safety hazard. I'm a public health epidemiologist by background. During my background, I did a lot of epidemiology on intentional and unintentional injury. This is a prime example of how a public health decision can be made by a planning board to avert unintentional and intentional injury. We know the risks of having that many cars travel through a densely populated residential neighborhood where many children, you can go, and I encourage you to come to that neighborhood, especially now in the summer, when children are out there riding their bikes, riding their scooters, playing with their friends in the street. It is a major consideration that cannot be ignored. I implore you, regardless of any other considerations regarding this development, that is the one public safety issue that must be addressed without any exception. We have come here to support this project. We are not here to oppose this project, as you found with other projects in the city where housing development was proposed. We're not trying to fight this or give the developer any headaches regarding this. We are trying to protect the lives of our citizens and our children in that neighborhood. And I implore you to understand that, recognize that, and we will follow this through, regardless of what it takes, to make sure our children are protected. Thank you.
Thank you. There were no other first-round speakers, so that will be the close of the public hearing. Thank you very much. So, does the board understand where we're at with design review in terms of we can stop design review and continue the application, but there has to be enough information. The board feels they understand the application. Next steps, if you go past design review, they would submit a completed application for all the completed application information, which does begin a review clock of 65 days once the application is accepted as complete. Design review can continue if we feel there's information we need. That's just how it works. So staff recommendation is one way we can go. We don't have to close the design review tonight. We can continue it. So what's the board's pleasure? Any questions?
I'm trying to find my language. If someone gets it first, then feel free.
Mr. Chairman, I can appreciate the comments around the need to ensure the safety of this project. Is it reasonable to ask for a site safety plan, an actual on how the applicant might come up with ideas on how to address, in addition to normal practice, things that are unique to this site, a plan that specifically speaks to neighborhood safety in the way of traffic graphically? And it could be, locations of, I'm throwing things out, it could be locations of crosswalk, lighting, signage, it could be all of the above. And typically these are things that are shown on a site plan already, but is there anything to ensure additional safety features?
You can, I think what you're getting to, you could add you could augment the request of the traffic study to include special attention to pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicle circulation, impact on the neighborhood, and the professionals doing the study could then consider that a part of their scope. I think one thing to consider, in addition to signage, as Mr. Simonis pointed out, is Amazon and other delivery drivers are going to be guided by GPS, and so there's got to be a way to, if a gate ends up being out there, that has to get into the GPS systems. Otherwise, they're going to drive out there, find a gate, get unhappy, and do bad things in the neighborhood driving back around.
I guess I would find the exercise useful if only, it could be that all of these safety features are already designed into the project, but they're not, but to call them out specifically, to make it clear
Are you talking about on-site itself, or?
approaching the site, I don't know how far out is reasonable to ask for, but,
Because there's a difference between what the traffic study will look outside the site. Ty and Bond is looking inside the site. So they have the capability for sure to look inside the site and call it any special
Yeah.
things that they're considering that, as Neil was pointing out in his presentation, there are aspects of the plan that may not be readily evident without some of the renderings and other things.
right,
So
thank you.
I think you made a good suggestion. I don't know how the rest of the
I
board
would just
feels
like for
about it.
all of those things to be made evident so that it was clear to the residents.
Right.
So there's a clear understanding of, not just the residents of the neighborhood, but for everyone, there was a clear understanding of how those safety issues are being addressed, how they're being identified, and how we're going above and beyond to, not just meeting the bare minimum, but going above and beyond to address them. That's all.
What that raises into for you to think about is, do you feel you have enough information tonight to say design review is finished, or would you need to see that information before feeling that?
I wouldn't need to
Closure
see
of
it
that.
before making, a decision to advance this, but I would certainly need to see it in future stages of the project, absolutely.
Okay.
I love the idea of asking them to increase the scope of their traffic study, to increase, like, as far as the bus stop that's going to be included, because we should make sure that there's safe pedestrian access from this site to that actual bus stop, on top of looking at the whole neighborhood. But I think one of the other things we could request, and I don't know, and maybe the city manager can help me with this part, but can we request that this project end up on Portsmouth Boulevard, so that it actually has a Portsmouth Boulevard address, and we essentially create a dead end of Dunlin Way before you get to Portsmouth Boulevard? And I don't know if we can request that, or just, encourage that is where this project ends, because I think that will make it seem more like it's part of the other end where Portsmouth Boulevard really exists, since really this is like where two roads meet and there's nothing really there because it's all blocked off. So I feel like this is a chance to create.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think the applicant would be amenable, and we would make sure with the fire department and E911 that all hurdles are cleared with that in that regard.
Then I personally would say that I've certainly got enough information for design review. I think we've given them a lot of information that we want them to come back with their application. There's a lot of utility work that's going to have to be sought out and figured out through the TAC process. So I think that it's got a long road ahead, and I wouldn't want to hold it up just for that. But we could also encourage them to invite us back when they're a little farther down the road to actually do that site visit, when some of the things that we've been talking about can actually be looked at and addressed at that point.
I agree. I think a lot of it is remedied through the TAC process alone. Joe is not incorrect by any means, and I think it's absolutely within means to
Andrew?
suggest.
Your microphone.
It's within reason to request all of those things. The intent is absolutely public safety. The intent is absolutely to preserve every established community within Osprey Drive, Blue Heron, and Dunlin, and so we will do that through site review. I think whether it's on-site or off-site, we have that discretion and ability and control, and TAC has every ability outside of that. So you're absolutely right, Joe. I for sure agree, but I also agree that none of that necessarily pertains to design review within the pretenses of why we have design review in the first place.
Tony?
Wasn't expecting to quote Taylor Swift tonight, but you know, it's hello, the problem. It's me. You know, kind of. I think I'm screwing up the words. My daughter will kill me.
You need to sing it, Tony.
Yeah.
We'll recognize it.
Please don't.
I know many of us on this board deeply care about affordable housing, and although this isn't meeting, you know, the definition of affordable housing, it's more housing in the community. So therefore, you know, and the denominator goes up. Hopefully, you know, supply and demand helps. And so I'm leery of, you know, we can be the problem by requesting all of these extra things, whereas if there's just a gate, like a lot of these problems go away. And so the message I want to send to the applicant is, yes, I have enough information here to say design review is complete. If you're going to come back without a gate, or the city doesn't want a gate for some reason, then it's going to open the can of worms to a lot of extra study. But if not, I don't know that we need to go crazy here, because I think we've met a lot of the demand. So I would just ask us to pump the brakes a little bit and let's make a motion for that the design review is complete. Let's have an additional comment on that we go out and do a site visit. But, you know, I think we've sent the message enough that all the things that are going to happen if they go down this road of, no pun intended, they go down the road with no gate. So
I wouldn't assume there's a gate, you know, and we got to hear what the fire department thinks about that in particular, and also then what type of gate. The gate out at Foundry is not something you can drive through. I've seen emergency access gates that a fire truck can literally drive right through. A car wouldn't, but a fire truck can. So that's something we're going to need input about. And I think a traffic analysis is going to have to look at with and without a gate, and what the ramifications of that might be. But that's my personal feeling on that one.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Hearing some of the comments, I'd like to make a motion to find the design review process complete.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes, Bill.
Can it be emphasized that the consensus of this group is that a gate impermeable to regular car traffic is a requirement within our thinking of design review?
they've heard us. They know. This isn't the site plan review.
This is non-binding.
Right.
So I think the consensus is understood.
I'm pretty sure that the applicant's gonna let TAC know that planning board's not gonna be happy unless they come back with something.
And as the chair of TAC, I can convey that to the fire department.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Design review is complete. We will look forward to additional information. Thank you very much. Sea level, right?
Yeah, do you want to just note that Frank?
All right, now where are we going?
Yeah. So we have a dead mic. Hello, there it is.
There we go.
That was interesting. For the next public hearing, I'd like to make it clear that Frank is sitting for Ryan and Logan is sitting for Paul, if that's okay. Just make that clear. The next request is Sea Level LLC as owner for property at 185, 187 Wentworth House Road, requesting a wetland conditional use permit in accordance with section 1010-1750 for the required remediation of PCBs by the EPA and associated impacts with tidal wetland and previously disturbed wetland buffer, including removal of sediment from existing salt marsh. Project proposes to add 6 inches of sand with the addition of planting salt marsh, bulrush plugs, and salt-tolerant grass mix, and adding boulder armoring and stone riprap for bank stability. Additional proposed impacts to the buffer include removal of half a cubic yard of soil in 2 different buffer locations, with one of those areas proposed to be covered with a geotextile liner and 5,000 square feet of concrete cap. This property is on Assessors Map 201, Lot 12, and lies in the Single Residence B or SRB and Waterfront Business or WB districts. Who is here to present this application?
Steve Graham, also Jay Johannet of Aries Engineering, representing Carol Riley, the owner of Sea Level LLC.
Is that the slide you want?
Yes, please. Shall I explain?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think the pointer here, right there.
If you hold the top button, it'll.
There it is. Thank you. So you see in orange here, we've got a few areas that had some residual PCB contamination from a prior cleanup effort. And so under EPA, US EPA approval, we are now proposing under the wetland conditional use permit to remove that. It affects an area, let's see here, right in here. In orange, it's about 175 square feet. There's another area here of about another 325 square feet. So a total of 410 square feet within this tidal wetland to be removed to between 6 and 12 inches depth, excavated, and then sent to a disposal facility, or placed under a 5,000 square foot cap here, this concrete cap. Now, this entire area is, first of all, it's with a marine, waterfront designated area, and this historically has been used for boat storage for many years. And it's been gravel, so it's had an impermeable surface. And so we are also removing, just to the left, there's a couple of little orange spots. We're removing that. And the green, this area, this is up within the wetland buffer zone. It is 770 square feet of wetland compatible vegetation and or trees being restored. And there is also some revetment. First of all, some riprap is shown here, about 305 square feet of riprap is being restored. It was there originally. It had been removed and placed actually off to the left. It's currently stored right here to allow the prior remediation efforts to occur. So we're restoring the riprapping, armoring the bank, essentially a retaining wall, and restoring the upper areas, the wetland buffer areas, again, the green. We're putting 6 inches of soil on top of that because there is some low-level, very low-level impacted PCBs and also some under this, this 5,000 square foot concrete pad. The tidal wetland will be replaced with sand as needed and also plugged wetland vegetation and or wetland grass, dependent, salt-tolerant wetland grass, depending on where it's above or below the HOTL. Any impacted soils that are required to be sent off-site will go to a licensed disposal facility. I think that summarizes our application.
Questions of the applicant? Yes, Bill.
So how much of the problem will this fix?
All of it.
Good answer. Any other questions? Yes, Frank.
Just to clarify, the PCBs or soil contaminated with PCBs are going to be either put under the concrete cap outlined in that purple or brought outside to a licensed disposal facility. Is that correct?
Correct. If it's over 50 parts per minute, it'll go off-site. If it's less than, it's more than 25, up to 50 will remain under the impermeable cap.
Okay. So that's what
otherwise, it's a
determines-
lower concentration in the green areas.
Okay.
This is a EPA-approved treatment approach, by the way.
Gotcha.
So it's already been approved by the EPA?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you. This is a public hearing. We're going to open a public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Last call. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Seeing nobody, I'm going to close the public hearing. Board discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Tony.
There are 4 conditions in the Conservation Commission letter and 1 in the recommended staff. I'm trying to jump between those to see if the difference.
All right, so the 3 of them were addressed in this updated submittal. of the
Okay,
planning
there we
board.
go. All right.
And then, so the only one that was carried over was this sign, the wetland boundary markers.
All right, so the amendment, the motion didn't have this conditional use, or this, did it?
Because we're only on the findings of fact.
Thank you. I've been away.
Got to get your brain back in.
Yeah.
Shake it off.
The legislature changed things.
Touche. Touche.
Any further discussions on the findings of fact? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll continue and I'll make a motion to vote the conditional use permit with the included 2.1 stipulation.
Second.
Any discussion? Again. You good?
I'm out of Taylor Swift references. Is that?
Yes.
I just say that I'm very excited that they're going to get this cleaned up and that it's going to fix the problem. So go forward. Do good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
You're approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the request of Jesse Warren Anderson, the owner for property located at 224 Kate Street, requesting an after-the-fact wetland conditional use permit for restoration work within the city's 100-foot wetland buffer for the unauthorized removal of vegetation within the vegetated no-cut buffer and removal of the ground cover on portions of the property that were within the protected wetland buffer without a permit. This property is located on Assessor's Map 173, Lot 3, and lies within the General Residence A GRA District. Who is here to present this application?
Hi, my name is Jesse Anderson. I'm the property owner. We submitted an application for the restoration of the property because 2 dead trees were removed in the back of the property, and there was damage to the ground and to the soil from the skid steer and the equipment that went back there. Our proposed plan is along the vegetation area of Hodgins Brook here is to plant 7 dogwoods and 3 red maples, as well as a conservation seed mix where the yard was disturbed in the disturbed soils. And then we would be buying, I know that the city had asked to see a maintenance plan and a schedule. We would be mowing the lawn when the lawn requires mowing and seeding or watering the seed mix daily until it's fully grown and I guess seeded and stable. I think that's gist of what we had submitted.
Questions of the applicant? Yes, Bill. Did you?
Am I right in understanding that the property's for sale?
Correct.
I want to say thank you for that thing about reading the trees and the shrubberies and how to plant them. I learned so much because I find myself a very not, good at knowing how to properly plant a tree. So I learned a lot. But second, I have a dogwood. It's flowering right now. It's beautiful. So they're really great trees. And I have some Japanese maples that are red. They're pretty. Are you going to be able to pass along to the new owner all of the maintenance that's going to need to be done? And, will the signs be put up in time so that they'll actually know where the buffers all are?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as the approval, or if the city approvals, we can get the signage up there. I know there's gonna be one sign dedicated to, notifying that that is a wetland area. And as far as vegetation, I mean, candidly, the grass has already grown in back there. So the seeding's gonna be very quick, and then the planting. I'm not sure what the timeline is for everything to take root, but I know that nowadays a lot of the trees that we're going to be purchasing and planting out there, they will be warranted. So yes, I think that is something that will be passed on to the new owners.
One of the proposed conditions is to have an action on the recorded document. I don't know if you saw that, Beth.
I did, but when is it getting recorded is kind of was my point.
Yeah. Did you do the clearing yourself?
I did not. I called an arborist. So I had a tenant living at the property last year, and they had called me and informed me that the trees kind of cracked and blew over towards the house. So I had a professional arborist come down, and they had abided by, I guess, state regulations, which was to remove the tree, and he was aware that it was, close to the wetlands. So he did not stump the trees, so left the stumps there, so it didn't disturb any of the roots or anything, pertaining to the wetlands there. But as we all know now, that the city requires, the permit, not just the removal of dead trees. So
The professional arborist wasn't aware of the city's regulations?
he was not. Nope.
Sounds like he's going to get a phone
Seems
call.
unusual. Yes, Bill?
Was there also quite a bit of disturbance of the ground cover?
So I think that I guess the verbiage that we need to get on the same page is that it wasn't disturbed soiled, it was back dragged. So they had to bring in equipment. They brought in a crane and an excavator, and on the way out of the tree removal, they back dragged over. Hence why, all the grass and everything is growing up right through right now. It's not like the land in the contour of the yard wasn't disturbed. It was simply just because the equipment was being driven across the yard.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you. Then I'm going to open the public hearing. Does anybody here or on Zoom wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Last call. Anybody here or on Zoom wish to speak to, for, or against this application? I'm going to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
make a motion to vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance, and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Yes, Bill?
Pretty clear. Sorry.
I've got a question about bonds. If we've got a circumstance where the owner is moving and there's a cost of doing the repair and the outcome of the repair is uncertain, if it's possible to require a bond that would go through the time of proving that the remedial work was successful.
There's a related bigger question that I don't think pertains exactly to this application, given where it's at with the review process, which deals with fines, which ties into that, and I want to have a discussion with the board about that in a general sense later. So, but it's a good question.
I don't think the scale of the I think your question in general is relevant, but for this project, I don't think the scale is worthy of a bond.
Well, let's not get too, we're on findings of fact, so
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
get through findings of fact. We can talk about the bigger question. It's a general, these after-the-fact applications are a concern in some cases. Sometimes it's inadvertent, sometimes it's not. So that's the conversation I'd like to have with the board, but not right now. So, anything else in finding of fact? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We keep going, Tony?
Vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions. I'm not going to read them all out. It's 2.1 through 2.5 as in the department memo. If
Second.
I write department memo.
Yeah. Any discussion? That's the proper way to reference it.
Is the document to be recorded at the registry prior to sale? Was that stated? Did I miss that? At time of sale?
It says it once the restoration work is completed. They'll ask for a release, so I'm assuming that means that it was already recorded then.
No, it hasn't been
It
recorded.
hasn't, okay.
We're just requiring it, so, it's up to the board if you want to tweak this language, but,
So, given that this is what I do for a living, it would be part of a due diligence for a prospective buyer of this property to know that this is to be recorded. Now, they could search this meeting, they could search the city website, what have you. But if it were recorded, it is a material disclosure with the sale of a property. And if it is recorded prior to sale, that is more helpful to a prospective buyer than at time of sale.
I think to cover what we're talking about, it should be reworded slightly to say that the document ensuring the completion of the restoration plan revisitation shall be recorded as a part of the approval by the planning board. So it would happen, if the board approved that, it would happen after tonight, right after tonight.
and you could say within 30 days, or, you could give
I think that would be wise.
What's the title, attorney, think?
Well, it's kind of the hat I'm currently thinking about. I guess what gets put on record would be extremely important to a sale, because the way I read this is that it would be released once that work is complete, but that work isn't complete till it all grows in and fills in, which could be 2 years down the road. So I do think it would be extremely important to make sure that the language, because this is going to, right, wearing my day hat, this is going to be a subject to in a title policy, that this property is subject to this restoration being done, right? So we want to make it clear, because they talk about a release, but I don't, release, I think it's just more a confirmation that the work was complete. But this is something that definitely needs to be disclosed to any potential purchaser, just on regular disclosures.
Right, and so that's why I think the recording of that instrument is critical now within a certain amount of
Right.
time, as
It
Peter
just needs to be
alluded to.
worded appropriately.
And I would say that subject to our approval tonight with these conditions, it would be worded fairly cut and dry, where there is not a lot of room for interpretation, if any at all. So a prospective buyer doing their due diligence would see these conditions, the seller would disclose those conditions, and it would be very clear what is required of that purchaser.
Yep.
And to that end, once it is completed, that can be released and eliminated from their registry, or from the,
Or just, it's, right, it's less, I hate to say the word release, it's less, it's been completed and the city is satisfied.
right, which I think trumps the registries.
And I think it could be initial restoration work is completed, because the ongoing issue that you're raising, Beth, that could be a never-ending.
Right, and that's why I brought it up.
Very good point. Tony, you
I think we're getting a little bit beyond our realm here in that I understand it and I respect it, but I think the conversation is good for the applicant, given that they're selling the house, but for us, I want to, but the only thing I'm the one who made the motion, but I don't see a timeline on when they have to get this completed by. I don't care that the property is being sold. I care that the project gets done.
Right.
It's almost a civil dispute, whether they tell them or not. That's between those parties, So, but I just want to make sure that it gets done. So I think we need to amend the motion that I proposed to have some sort of time frame on when the work has to get completed by, and I'm comfortable with adding language on when it needs to be recorded. I think those two things, though, right? I'm looking at Peter. Is there a rule that is unstated here when they have to start these repairs by? I know that by his demonstration, he's already started some of them.
Right, there isn't a timeline. I mean,
We could establish a
you could
timeline.
establish one. Certainly for recording the document, that would be appropriate.
Okay, then I'm gonna propose an amendment to my motion, a 2.6, that recording occur to the Registry of Deeds, is that right?
Yes.
Occur in the next 6 months.
It's part of 2.5, so you could just add it to that.
Fine. We're going to modify or add to 2.5 that the County Registry of Deeds gets recorded within the next 6 months.
Are you talking about
You
the
want the
initial
work?
or
You
the
know,
completed?
but that's the document. I thought you meant the work. You wanted.
Well, as a separate item. I had two
You're
items.
about to get there.
Yeah.
Tell us what your second one was.
That the work begin, and I'm trying to come up with a time frame that's reasonable. I know it's partially begun, or I guess we want the work complete, right?
Yeah.
1 year. 1 year? What's reasonable?
I mean,
Before
ideally,
it's on
the
property?
trees could be planted in the fall. I mean, that's probably the ideal time to plant the trees.
Okay.
I think, oh, sorry.
Yes.
I think that's reasonable. It makes for a cleaner sale for the applicant as well. It's recording it, getting it done, it makes for a much cleaner.
So 2.5 is going to be modified to include Registry of Deeds, has to be filed with Registry of Deeds within 6 months, and the restoration has to occur within 1 year of date of approval, assuming of June 18th. Has to be complete by June 18th, 2026.
How about modifying, or considering modifying the first one to within 6 months or prior to sale?
That's fine.
I mean,
I just need a second, right?
you know, I'm talking without a second, just because.
Second.
So we're gonna do it with 6 months or prior to sale, is what the 2.5 has been modified to.
Right.
And then 2.6 is restoration work complete before January 18th, 2026.
And that's what's being seconded.
June 18th.
That's what.
June 18th.
June 18th, thank you.
That was a second to both, right?
That's correct.
Folks understand where we are?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Just want to be clear on the restoration work being complete doesn't include the continued monitoring of the life of said plants.
Correct.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sally Forth. Next item on the agenda is request to Strawberry Bank, Inc., as owner for property at 65 Washington Street, requesting an amended site plan approval for drainage and stormwater improvements. This property is on Assessors Map 104, Lot 7, and lies within the mixed-use residential office, or MRO, and historic districts. Who is here to present this application?
Thank you, Alex Ross. I prepared the plans that were submitted. So this is a really simple project. Amended site plan with some drainage improvements. And Peter, actually, if you can go back to that first sheet. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with Strawberry Bank, the grounds out there. The area of concern here is just to the left or the west of the skating arena. And then if you can flip the page there. And I think two more. So we recently completed a lot of work on the Penn Hollow House, which is right on Washington Street there. And this whole area is kind of notorious for drainage issues. Everything's so flat. And what we wanted to do is design some rain gardens, some swales, and some additional small catch basins. So that's what this plan shows. We have gone before TAC. We had a good discussion with them. And then after that meeting, DPW wanted some minor tweaks that we worked out with Dave DeFosis. So I think everyone at TAC was happy with what we're proposing here. Very, very small in area, really minor. but will improve the drainage in this small local area. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions of the applicant? No questions? Thank you. Open public hearing. Is anybody here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? No one on Zoom? Last call. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Seeing nobody, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Vote to find that site plan application meets the requirements set forth in the site plan regulations, section 2.9, evaluation criteria, and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Any discussion on the findings? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Vote to grant the amended site plan approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
Simple project, net benefit, no negatives.
It's an improvement. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You're approved. Thank you. Next item is request of, oh, wait, should we combine these two?
Yes. That'd be good.
Chair, I'll make a motion to consider items D and E together.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? D&E together. D&E are the request of SLF Realty Group LLC as owner for property at 400 Spalding Turnpike, requesting an amended site plan approval to change the temporary access path to a permanent access path. Property is on Assessor's Map 238, Lot 2, and is in the Gateway Corridor G1 District. Also, they are requesting an after-the-fact wetland conditional use permit for permanent wetland buffer impacts that were not included in the original wetland conditional use permit for this project. The new request is an increase in wetland buffer impact from 1,644 square feet to 3,685 square feet. Same property, 238, map 238, lot 2, in the G1 district. Who is here to present this application?
My name is Stephanie Tetrault from Ty and Bond, project manager and environmental scientist. I'm here on behalf of Eversource, on behalf of SLF Realty or Portsmouth Ford. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are here tonight requesting after-the-fact approval of an amended site plan and the conditional use permit. Back in 2003, Eversource received a conditional use permit for right-of-way and utility line maintenance along this section here, which included this wetland access route from Echo Drive or Echo Ave across down the center of the right-of-way to access these two structures, structures 19 and 19. That included this direct wetland impact with timber matting as well as wetland buffer impacts across the upland stretch here to reach those structures. After receiving that approval, Eversource was able to secure an access agreement from Portsmouth Ford or SLF Realty to access the right-of-way. Yes, thank you. From this more direct route here, resulting in a shorter access to the structures to be maintained, as well as eliminating entirely the direct wetland impact. It did result in an additional wetland buffer impact because of the orientation of this accessway. It's important to note too that this gravel accessway was already largely existing. It was improved for this project to access these structures last year. But that is the route that they took in the end instead of accessing across the wetland as originally approved or proposed. So today we are requesting after the fact approval of that modification, as well as to retain that existing gravel access route and to install a gate to prevent any further use of that access route and the gravel work pad area, which there was a history of the car dealership parking cars on that section. So to minimize that and to allow for continued maintenance and safety access to the structures by Eversource, that's the purpose of the gate. The Conservation Commission last month did request an additional note on the plan, which specifies that the access only be used for accessing the structures and not to be used for vehicle storage or parking in the access route. They also requested a wetland signage at the entrance to the gate, which we would intend to install. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions to the applicant?
Can you go back to the colored plan and show where, I was looking down on my plan, I'm not sure if you pointed it out, where the gate is going to be?
Sure. It would be right here.
Thank you.
Historically, there were a row of boulders there. Those were relocated for the recent maintenance work, and then they were actually put back in place. So those boulders would be replaced with an actual gate.
I'm looking at a Google Maps aerial view, and you can see 7 cars
Sure.
parked in that area. It appears to flare as you get towards Echo Ave, flare pretty wide, more so than what is shown here. Will those gravel boulders have the ultimate intention, or will the gate and any other improvements have the ultimate intention to get no vehicle access even on the dirt? It's only on the pavement, is that correct?
Correct. The gate is proposed to be 16 feet wide.
This area looks like it's much wider than 16 feet. Whoa. I don't know the date, but it looks like the dirt swale, I don't know how to describe it, looks about 58 feet long when I measure it.
This
No,
route here?
parallel, the dimension I'm giving is parallel to the road. It looks like the road, they've slowly over time developed a dirt shoulder. And so they actually have 3 cars, parked head in, 2 and then 2. So it's quite wide, and I'm looking at what is beyond just a 16-foot gate or whatever it is. Are you doing other things to prevent that encroachment?
We're not proposing to, no. I mean, the area to the right is wetland, and it's pretty well grown in with shrubbery and wetland vegetation. And the area to the left is even more grown in with shrubbery. It doesn't, today at least, it's not an area you would drive or park a car in.
Is it today?
There is, just to make sure you're not looking at the area closest to the structures up here, which is flat, and in some of those aerial images is open gravel where cars have been parked in the past. And that would be completely blocked off.
Peter, do you have the ability to pull up Google Maps?
Yes.
Are you speaking to, so I believe we're speaking on your photograph number 2.
It looks like a different area.
Overview of the as-built gravel access to structures 19 on the E194, U181 lines.
Looking
Are
for
we in
it.
the same place? Are you showing boulders going across that road?
Yes.
That's the same location, yeah, I thought so.
Yes.
This is 2025 aerial.
Okay. So this must be, that's with the gravel in there. If you zoom in there,
You can see the lines of the old.
yeah. I've done a lot of car dealerships in this
This-
city. I've worked on a lot of them. I mean, through the planning board years, and they will find place to put cars. And so I just want to clean that area up. That that's great. You're putting a gate in, and that blocks that distance. But there seems to be more space available, and if we can make sure that is cordoned off with stones or whatnot.
You're right. The reason all these boulders are here were prior condition that so they wouldn't park along the Echo Ave. That's why all these boulders are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So SLF owns the dealership and this land?
Yes.
Yes, Paul.
I have what I think is an obvious question because I don't know the answer to it. You had sort of the access that went through the wetlands and sort of the purple you can still see cutting across. Why did you go all the way up and then back down versus just like going in and immediately turning left?
Because it was largely existing.
Okay.
It's also, to the extent it was existing, it was not disturbed, and this area really is
Would have been disturbed.
relatively undisturbed.
Okay. I just, from looking at it now, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just one question. How often does Eversource expect to use the road for maintenance?
Ashley Friend, I'm with Eversource Energy. At this point, those structures have been replaced, so it would really be for, regular inspections or if there were any additional types of equipment as technology progresses. So I wouldn't, once every couple years, if that. And like I said, we would use the existing road and the gate as the entry point.
Okay, so like slightly less than annually.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Is there anything in the city procedures or in your procedures that makes this after the fact? It seems like most of the environmental stuff that we deal with is after the fact.
Just
No,
tonight.
no, just tonight. That's part of the later conversation I want to have with the board.
Thank you. It's never intentional to be after the fact, no.
Are we in the public hearing? I don't
Yes,
remember.
we should,
We are in the,
yes.
all right, in the public hearing.
We haven't,
Wait, no, the public hearing hasn't started.
That's
So,
right.
any other questions,
This has to be a public.
any other board questions?
Not a question, just a statement. In this particular case, though, what we've learned from the applicant is that the impact is so much, is minimized rather than where
Right.
the right-of-way was going before. It was an obvious improvement to do it the way that they did.
So I think the intention is to prevent cars being parked out there, as you said. The gate, as you are proposing it, will prevent cars from being parked out there? Is that your representation?
Yes,
So cars cannot be parked out there with this gate you are proposing?
correct. And the note on the site plan.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Please give your name and address and step right up.
My name's Christine Wade, and I live at 1380 Woodbury Ave, and I am fourth generation Cacken resident of the planning where they showed the cars. That's the property of us, not the property of the Ford garage or Eversource, and I'm not sure which way they are, but Eversource has come in. This is the first time they've come in the 50 years that I've been there. We've got the third generation, we've got the fifth generation of all Cackens that have lived in this property all the way down. That may be having a little bit of gravel there, but it is in a wetland buffer. There is absolutely no reason for them to keep it because there's can you go back to their slides and their shows of the original thing that you approved? Can I ask that?
No,
I just didn't know if I could ask it. I'm sorry. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not very skilled with this thing, but the original one goes through the wetlands to hit number 20. So right in around here is the pole's number 20. That's the reason why they're going through the wetlands, going straight through to number 19. 19 is on our property. They came in, they had to replace those poles like you would have to after, 50, 60, whatever number of years, you'd have to replace them. For some reason, I don't know if I can scroll up on this thing. Can I scroll up or do you have to scroll up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. For some reason, they decided to go up and cut down more onto our property, so that purple part is our property. Actually, the top of that white is also our property. I don't know why they decided to come in there, but they did, and they fixed whatever they needed to do with those poles. That area is now going back to vegetation where it is wetlands buffer. And there's no reason to put a gate or anything of that sort because that little yellow box is an easement number 7 that Eversource has always worked from in order to get to those poles. So there is absolutely no reason to keep any of those access paths or make them permanent or to put a gate, because that should be going back to the wetlands. Because what we're having is all the water come over to our property that the industries have been pushing over. If we go over to the other side, what it is my mother owns all the way down, and she owns 3 properties above. She owns 238-3, which is that little square down there, 238-4, 238-5, 238-7 next to Applebee's. When Omni Mall went in 1996, they took the wetlands where Home Depot is, got pushed to where that green area is, and it is slowly taking our property next to Applebee's. We don't need Ford Garage to now decide to start parking the cars there, which again, the gate will stop, obviously, or when we ask them to. But, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
Hi, so I'm Julie Patel, also 1380 Woodbury Avenue. Most of them are questions, so I don't know how I'd handle that. The first thing would be, why is this request coming from the Ford Garage, not Eversource? What is the benefit to the Ford Garage? Would kind of be a question there. Like what was said, there's no real reason. I understand the existing gravel path is there, but you don't have to use the entirety of the gravel path. It's there, doesn't necessarily need to be used. I'm actually, is it this scroll, or can we go down to
That's just a pointer.
Oh, okay. Can we go down to the very last page? The original, plan? Engineering plan? Yeah, that's the one. Oh, what one? Yep, sorry, this one. Right here. So this one shows a lot better of where kind of the lot lines are. So this is a pointer somehow. Which button is my pointer? There we go. Okay. So down here at the bottom, this is your Ford Garage. Right here is that road they're talking about. So that gate would be here. Your gravel path goes up, and then it comes over, goes down, all the way back down over to this, this corner over here, which is back again next to the road. So if we look at that, this is actually lot line, owned by Patricia Katkin, not the Ford Garage. This side is also owned by the Ford Garage. So now if we go down here, we also see there's an easement down here that are already abuts up against where the poles would be. It's a sewer easement, so obviously that's for underground things, but like I said, if you look at this one thing here, I think there's about 9 easements in this one area. So we're asking, again, if we're putting a access gate here for a gravel road for Eversource, apparently, but again, the request came through Ford, to go up and then cut through now 75% of the area. You're also making it so that any non-wetland, non-buffer land is only really this top portion now, because you're cutting off this bottom portion. You're also separating the 2 wetlands from one each other. You're now making 2 different ecological sites as opposed to 1. So you have 2 different ecosystems now that you're splitting in half. The other things I'd like to mention is some things that the report say it's unaesthetic and therefore no wildlife live there. I actually visited it today. Did take some pictures and look at things. There's a bunny right there. So if you want to see that, show you that. Other things, there's cars parked there right now. So kind of like that Google Maps picture, there is, if you go over to the site today, there is a car parked right here on the side of the road, right next to that path. So it's already happening, even though those boulders there, the gate's not going to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here on Zoom wish to speak to or against this application?
I'm Patricia Katkin. I own the property at 1400. Well, I own property at 1380, 1400, and 1430 Woodbury Ave. My husband's family has owned the property since the property actually continued all the way to Pease at one point, that my husband's family owned it. My concern is like they're saying, you have all this property down at the bottom where you could come onto my property from the Ford Garage without filling in a wetland area and coming up, and they actually had to take down a stone wall to get to that area from doing that. That used to be It was never much, it wasn't wide enough for a car at one point when I first started. I've lived here, I've lived in this area for, well, at this house for almost 50 years. There was no real road there. There was a little bit of, it wasn't wide enough for a car. Since then, they added all that dirt that they actually, and I have pictures on my phone, I didn't think to print them off, that they had cars parked all the way along that roadway, and 8 cars were parked on my property. As you come up around the hook, that's my property. They had 8 cars parked there, and I had to ask them to move their cars. I was told by somebody in the Ford garage that it was their property, and I said, nope, it's not, and they had to call me back and correct that they found out that it was my property. That roadway was made wide enough that I could drive my Ford truck that I bought from the Ford garage past all those cars and park onto my property to take the pictures that I took. So I definitely, I'm against the gate. I'm against that roadway. I'm against the whole buffer, the added soil that they added there. My biggest concern is, like I said, I own 1380, 1400, and 1430. Over the years, I've had to deal with development with Market Basket, Applebee's, Hooley Way with all those apartments, houses, Echo Avenue condos. All of that water is being diverted somewhere, and guess where? My property. So I would like to say that I'm against that buffer. I'm against the gate. I'm against them being able to cross onto my property through where there was a stone wall at one point. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do have pictures if you need to see pictures of cars on my property.
Is there anybody else, excuse me, is there anybody else here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to or for against this application? Any second round speakers?
Just real quick, one thing that I wanted to say is under, and I have it written down because God forbid I would remember this, under New Hampshire Wetlands Bureau rules, the most local conditional use permit frameworks, applicants must demonstrate that no reasonable, less impacting alternative exists. I can demonstrate it for you. It's right here. These are your poles right here. You got a road. Even if you zoom up to their pictorial view as opposed to like the zoning type, you can see the same exact thing. You can go right from a parking spot. It's less impact to the wetland buffer. It's also in a buffer zone, not a wetland zone, smaller area, smaller square footprint. Not sure why that wasn't looked into, but just so you know, there is a less impacting alternative available. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody, any other second round speakers?
I just want to make sure that we're here, as we've done all this tonight, that we're here for residents and not for the industry and how the industries are changing the city of Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other second round speakers? I'm going to close the second round. Is there any third round speakers? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Board discussion.
I think my initial reaction is that I don't want to make this a legal conversation because it's not our purview, but I do wonder what the easements say in respect to access, location, and size, or capacity, I suppose, to the subservient property. that we just heard from. And if we are even ruling on something that we don't necessarily have control of. Now, I could be way off.
I can tell you what some of these are. Easement 7, which is right here, is a sewer easement. And then there's a 300, the public service has a 300-foot easement across this whole area. That's what part of this easement is.
300 feet from where to where to what area? Like, is that 300 square feet or linear?
300 linear feet across, like from the property line here.
Into the Catkins property?
Yep, north.
And that's an access easement. That's for passage?
That's just the transmission line easement.
Okay.
300 feet along that area.
Which I would guess includes maintenance thereof, those utilities.
And then a lot of the other easements are just drainage easements, slope embankment easements, utility easements, but they're further away.
So it has been established that with these easements, the utility company does have the ability to make changes, maintain, improve upon their service and the area underneath it.
I think the question you're raising is, does the building of the driveway road exceed their rights for maintenance?
That sounds so much better, yeah.
What I'd like to know is whether or not leaving it exceeds the previous approval, because if the access that we gave them previously approval said it all had to be returned, which is normally what we do, then why in this case are we not saying the same thing? That's my question.
Tony, then Joe.
I would like us to handle the findings of fact first and then get into this discussion. Because I think it is confusing. It's a lot of stuff going on here. But when we have the second discussion, I think the thought experiment I had in my head is, what if this was, the whole area was one owner? Whole area, right? Take away ownership stuff, and we're going to look at it from a wetland point of view. Is this a better modification than what we looked at previously? That's where my mind works. I'm like, was this change, despite the ownership disputes, was this change a better change for considering the wetlands? I think we asked that first. There seems to be I have some concerns on the Ford property if they're meeting the current, what their site plan approval is. There may have been some encroachment on pavement on that Echo Ave. There's certainly, I don't know if their site plan allows them to park on Echo Ave like they're parking. There seems to had been some processes to prevent that. So that's why I'm like, I want to go down this road more as a group, but let's get through do we understand what the application is before us? I think we do. So I want to make a motion to find the findings of fact as presented. It's nothing to do with approval, that's for the audience benefit. We're just saying, yeah, we understand the project, right?
Do we understand? I mean, I understood it as one owner. That's why I asked the question. I thought it was one landowner. Yeah. Which is where you started with your hypothetical, and it's not. So that does raise some questions to me that weren't addressed.
That we don't have enough information to move forward?
Well, that's what I'm wondering about. Do we need more information before we should act on this? Joe?
I think, thank goodness that we heard from the landowners, because we're getting the information that we need the further we go. But I mean, half an hour ago, we didn't have all the information we needed. I was going to ask questions about is this the only access easement to the site? Well, there's utility easements, there's maintenance easement, but is this the only access easement to the site?
300 feet apparently.
And does this access easement in any way benefit the owner of the property somehow? Is it possible that it benefits them?
Doesn't sound like it.
Well, they're not in favor of it, so but that's a question. But I think to Beth's comment, the restoration that normally would occur hasn't occurred, so that's another question. Bill?
So there was a question of fact of whether what was done was the least impact option of things that might have been done. And so if we're looking for finding a fact, I don't think we know that fact. If it's a
I guess
pertinent
one
fact.
question is, can that driveway continue in its current location? Did it exceed its rights to be built in the first place?
What I was getting at with my line of questioning was, what are the possible uses to the property owner of this property? Could this property owner accept this access easement and rent parking to Portsmouth Ford on their lot, generate revenue for themselves? This is a desperately need. I mean, is this possible? I know there's easements, there's overhead lines. I'm not sure if they're interested in it. I'm just saying, I'm looking for a way for it to benefit them.
Right.
Rather than being a
Parking
hardship.
as a principal use on a lot is
Say that
not-
again?
Parking as a principal use on a lot is not allowed.
Without a variance.
But
And parking in a wetlands buffer next to a wetland is not.
Well,
I don't know.
there's a lot of dry land here too, yes or no?
I think
Clear,
just-
cleared area.
I think we have the finding of fact. I mean, my understanding of that state law was that people were putting applications in to memorialize a certain, zoning change or building code change, and they wanted to get locked in. I don't think that's happening here. We understand this project. There's a lot of dispute about land ownership and rights and whether it's environmentally better or not. I get all that. I feel like that's the second step. But I think I know what this project do we need anything other from the applicant to rule?
Well, that's where I would chime in on that. And as I'm reading this, and as we heard from the subservient property, if there are impacts from runoff and residual drainage onto their value add property, then that is an impact to an abutter and a negating impact to approving this application. So findings of fact would suggest that we do not have all the materials that have now been presented or been spoken upon, and because of that, it makes me curious. Like, is there I say this, but is there a drainage study that needs to be done? Is there proof that maybe there is a negative impact on the public's land? And so I'm very curious, is there, mittens of material, not in negligence, but just by nature of what has just been said, that we are missing?
And perhaps it's my ignorance. I thought that the findings of fact is not the point where you get the drainage studies. It's the approval side. It's after that you can, am I wrong on that? I thought
The findings are the basis for the board's decision. The reason that we're required to do findings of fact is before the legislature required us to do it. If there's litigation, the courts had to do it. And the court said it's hard to figure out what the findings were. And what we have, you see the notice about quasi-judicial action. This is quasi-judicial action when we hear from the members of the public. That's stuff that you can't foresee. That's why we're sitting in quasi-judicial capacity. So we have new information. Staff didn't have that information. The applicant didn't have that information, I will presume. But in any case, we didn't until tonight. Now we've got some new information. I think the questions, as I see it, do we try to act on this tonight? Do we continue this and ask for some additional information to the next meeting?
And again, like, maybe I'm a painful optimist, but I don't think it was done in negligence, and I do think that there's something positive trying to be done here with improving wetland impact. But it also sounds like a simple conversation with these folks could probably produce a really helpful and productive and constructive type of study or site analysis that, hey, like, if there is residual drainage or negative drainage that was not included in this plan, that can be solved through a conversation. Hey, it's draining this way, let's try to mitigate, redirect, what have you. And hopefully the two parties can do that and then come back to us with just more information so that we're not up here guessing. And Tony, you're not incorrect by any means, and I definitely have gray matter on that findings of fact, but I don't want to leave it up to litigation or leave it up to the interpretation of anything else, I don't think.
I was just going to do it under the next thing. I felt like we have missing information, but I thought we could memorialize that we understood the project, which is fine. So I'll make a motion that we decline having enough information. I'm not sure the language. Let me pull that up.
You probably want to withdraw your first motion.
I'll withdraw my first. No, I never got it.
He was talking about it, he didn't make it.
You didn't,
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. The site plan does not, my motion is that the site plan does not meet the requirements set forth in the site plan regulations, section 2.9, evaluation criteria. And I think that is due to lack of information provided on easements and more pertaining to the stormwater and flow on the site. Where is it going and that sort of stuff. So we need some evaluation of the wetland impacts due to this grade change.
It stays in place.
And then more clarity on the easements.
So you're not making a motion to deny, you're looking for, sounds like
Postponement?
more of a continuance to get additional information.
I would look towards your recommendation or staff recommendation on that.
Sounds like a continuance to me.
Right. Sounds like a continuance.
I'll modify it for a continuance.
To the July meeting.
Yeah.
For additional information regarding stormwater and easements. Now,
I'll second.
I'm not suggesting we get into civil matters here. That's an
Agreed.
area we definitely don't want to get involved in, but the stormwater seems like a legitimate question. So, and the easements are probably something they can simply address. Yes, Beth?
I'd also like to get more information about the way, before this road was put in, the flows of the wetland and the buffer and the values versus now, because I feel like, I don't know, I just sort of feel like this is more than it needs to be, especially if they only need to get in here every 2+ years. And if there's another way to access it that would be a shorter route to get to those poles, I just feel like there might be some alternatives, and it would be nice to get more information about other possible alternative access points that wouldn't quite cut off that much of the buffer.
One question, maybe I missed it. The original approval, were they supposed to restore the site after they were done with using
Right,
it?
it was temporary.
It was
impacts.
temporary.
It was that's what I thought.
So that's a comparison that I think we should have, is comparison between if it had been restored versus leaving it the way it is, Joe.
And maybe when we see this again, maybe the graphics are a little more definitive. On the last color drawing, tie and bond drawing, lot number 833-033, it appears, according to this diagram, that the white access, they used white for the access drive, is off that lot, and it remains on lot 833-032. So according to this drawing, it is not on, that gate would not be placed on 833-033.
You're saying it is currently on Ford's lot.
Correct.
And
this.
Yeah, I think everything I've seen is agreement with what you just said.
So this is on Ford's lot. This is not on 833-032. As I understand it.
Which aligns with the city's GIS.
Do you mind, can you point to that on the screen?
Yep. There's no drawing number on it, unfortunately, but it's the last tie and bond color rendering.
I think there is a portion on the other lot.
This one?
There is
Yes.
that little
Yeah.
portion.
The hook at the
Oh,
end.
yeah, there is that tiny little portion, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but the gate itself is not on.
Right, the gate will be down here.
Right,
Clarification on boundaries would satisfy that.
correct.
I know you have the information, it just might be made more graphically clear.
Yeah, the lot lines are kind of bleeding together. It's hard to really see.
There's a lot of lines in there.
Yeah.
In the narrative from Ty and Bond, it does say that Eversource obtained a landowner authorization from Portsmouth Ford Auto Dealership to access the right-of-way directly from Echo Ave. As such, construction deviated from what was permitted by the CUP in this area, and both structures were accessed by a more direct route. So to your point about where the gate falls, is it Portsmouth Ford that's granting that, or is it the Catkins? Yeah. So if that's your question, I think that's remedied there.
Well, I think the question is, were they correct? Does it,
Right,
is it on Portsmouth Ford land? That's a simple thing to answer.
Yeah.
Nope, sorry.
This helps me understand why when the question was asked earlier, is it one landowner? In that case, where the gate is, it's all on the same, the applicant and the owner of where the gate is going is the same, according to this drawing. So.
And then the hook gets onto the other property.
That's true.
So we have a motion, right?
I was just going to ask for clarification of all the things that Peter's been writing down.
All right.
It's basically a motion to continue.
Right.
Is it to continue items, both items?
Yes.
We joined them. We joined them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So more information on the site plan about easements and access, stormwater flow on the site, flows of wetlands before and after, and then look at potential alternative access points, and then clarification on boundaries, lot lines on the site plan, or on the wetland exhibit, I guess.
And wasn't one of them a comparison between what would have been the case with the prior approval versus leaving this one the way it is? Is that a valid question or not?
Right, because it was supposed to be restored, and now they're not, so, yeah. If they were supposed to restore it before, I don't understand why they wouldn't think to restore it afterwards.
Folks clear on this? As much as we can be clear?
Yeah, I mean, just Joe's pointing something on the screen. I think part of the frustration is, and I'm sorry speaking for you,
go
Joe,
ahead.
is that I think with the intent of coloring and there's so much going on here, it is confusing on the drawings on what particular shading means and that sort of stuff, more so on the black and white drawings, but even this. So just some overall improvement in the graphics, even if it takes more documents to do it, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I just, and I don't want to be punitive to a utility company that I think generally does well with the wetlands. We've seen them in front of us time and time again. But if there are claims that it's creating an adverse impact on the public's property, then that's something that we should follow up on.
I think that's what we're doing.
Perfect.
So move the question.
Everybody ready?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
So just as part of this, I mentioned it during one of my comments, can we direct the staff to look into the site plan approval for Portsmouth Ford in that Echo Ave area and what's allowed in there?
Sure.
Certainly. Appreciate it.
The matter's been continued to next month.
Staff will get back to you.
Follow up with Peter. If the board wants to, move to amend the rules for a question, we could do that. Otherwise, it's not permitted.
I'd rather go through staff.
Probably.
You follow up with Peter. We have,
Thank you.
yes, thank you very much, everybody. We have two items being requested for, it says postponement. I think they need to be continued, right, to July, or
Yes.
do they not know?
They were noticed, so we'll just continue to July, assuming they get out of Conservation Commission.
We don't have to take them.
Right.
So we can have a motion to consolidate items 2F and G and to then continue them to the July meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Then you need a motion to continue?
I asked for it as two.
Combined it.
Yeah, I combined
Oh,
it.
you combined it? I
combined
didn't know
it.
you could. Thought we had to do one and then the other.
Just did.
All right, there we go. Sure.
Trying to get through this stuff for everybody.
Oh,
1035 Lafayette, I think.
that should be next.
Requesting a 1-year extension to site plan review and development site density bonus off-street parking conditional use rules that were granted August 15th, 2024.
Moved. Grant the extension.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Extended. Next item, 806 US Route 1 bypass, requesting 1-year extensions to site plan, which was granted a second extension, June 2024, and the amended site plan approval granted on the same date. This one is supposed to be a third extension.
That's what I was
Yeah,
trying
it
to
is.
clarify. This is a third extension? And what is their reasoning? I mean,
Well,
I
if you-
didn't really
If
see
you remember,
it.
they came in after this one was approved and developed the site next door.
So this is the first site,
This is the first site.
Okay.
The current
Yep.
city, and
the current market,
So-
and they're still trying to move to the
they're
other.
building the other one, and then this one, they haven't gotten finished their post-approval process, with site bonding and all that, because they've been focusing on the other project.
Does staff feel like this is
Nothing's
progressing?
changed. TAC.
I'd like to move to
reviewed it.
grant the extension.
Okay.
Any discussion? Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Under my updates, we've got several zoning amendments that you'll be seeing shortly. Staff's been working on. Nothing too hugely dramatic. One does directly affect the co-living application and other applications in the downtown. Right now, the building footprint, the way we've got it defined in our zoning ordinance, is actually a problem for all the buildings in our downtown, which touch each other. So, trying to fix that. The other topic that came up earlier during 224 Kate Street with regard to after-the-fact applications, there seems to be two types that we've been seeing in recent months. One is inadvertent. The other one might be more expedient way to do things, perhaps with less wetlands impact. And then there's the, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's a zoning violation. And by state law, you're subject to a per diem fine if you do that. Now, historically, the city hasn't pursued that. I'm not asking for a board decision tonight, but even though this is the sort of thing I would typically do on my own volition with the legal department, I'd like the board's support to go to the legal department to discuss it with them and staff, both planning staff and legal staff, to see if we can make a recommendation for how to address these things, because it's $175 a day for the first offense and $275 a day for subsequent offenses. It's significant, as it should be for a zoning violation. So
I'm in support of it. I would just, I think tying that, it's going to be small dollars, but whatever dollars are collected from that should be tied to some sort of environmental effort.
Conservation Commission.
Right.
Joe.
We ran into this a little bit years ago on the HTC where we had a flagrant violation on a very large project. And there were discussions about, fines. And what we decided back then was it should always be done by the city. The volunteer boards themselves should never be tied to enforcing a fine on a fellow citizen. It doesn't bode well for board members in the community to be fining.
Well, we can't, technically, this board can't fine anybody.
Right. We
But-
even recommend to fine
But
somebody.
if an applicant comes before us with a zoning violation, you're not supposed to approve anything that has violated the ordinance.
Right.
So it's a cascade of issues that relate, that's why the legal department needs to be involved.
Yeah.
And that's why staff needs to be involved.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to be able to report back, this is how it's going to be addressed, because it's falling through the cracks, in my opinion and in my experience right now.
How is it defined?
Any violation of the zoning ordinance. So if you build a building too close to the property line without a variance, that's a zoning violation.
What about like tree removal in the wetland buffer?
As soon as you cut that tree, it's a zoning violation if you don't have.
So I guess, yeah, how is it defined as intentional versus inadvertent?
That's where it gets beyond this board.
Okay.
That would be.
All right, so that's not what you're asking.
That's the code, it's not our discretion. That's
Oh,
the
okay.
code. That'd be the code.
Then, yeah, then for sure.
The other information it would be useful to have is how many, what is the frequency of the city enforcing fines? Because there needs to be consistency. Certain fines, it has to be consistent.
Clearly.
So I don't know how many times the city has fined.
Sometimes the threat of a fine can work.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation that I think needs to take place. And
Yep. Okay.
with your support, it'll
Publish
have
it like the
conversation.
police law.
Good.
And the only other thing, the master plan has started. We had Ann was out on Market Square Day. Bill and I were there. Peter Burtz was there. I think you were there, to get some input from all the folks around Market Square. We're going to have a conversation with with Util, who's the consultant, soon. Unfortunately, I don't have a date yet, but it'll be very soon. And the process, it's about a year and a half, roughly. It's underway, and that's what I have to.
When you say that we're going to have a conversation with the consultant, that would be the planning board, would be
Yes.
a work session with the consultant?
Yes.
Excellent.
And unless anybody else has something urgent, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Happy Juneteenth.
Good night.